Good evening. I want to call the January 23rd, 2018 special meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard to order. Is the meeting been officially warned?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. First order of business is public participation, and this is a chance for anyone in the public who would like to say something about something not on the agenda. Please come on up. You are our public tonight, so.
I'm first in line. Nick Nickerson from Brattleboro. I haven't been here for a while, so I've been wondering if you all have talked about or taken any action on school football in light of brain damage, CTE. Has that been brought up?
It has not, no.
Well, I would like y'all to start thinking about, one, what I would do, which would be ban it till a child reached 18, and then he could decide if he wanted to damage his brains by playing football or not. I don't think that should be up to his parents or his guardians to decide that he can go ahead and damage his brains. That should be something he should decide when he has some degree of judgment, and you're just beginning to get that at 18. And you finally get it, I think, 26, am I saying? Prefrontal develops until 26, 28. So if you're, that's my 2 cents. People are also writing and talking about reforming it, such as not allowing, I'm not a football player, my parents wouldn't allow it. In those days you didn't make money off football. So I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but running the ball forward after kickoff is one area that could be reformed because you're accelerating tremendously. You got heavy players, very muscular, and collisions are causing brain damage. So that's one area of reforming. The other area of reforming would be when the two teams line up, head to head, helmet to helmet, just 2 or 3 feet from each other, and bang helmets. That's brain damage happening. So another thing would be to, instead of just getting down like this, standing up, so when you take off, your head isn't in front of you, your hands are, so you don't have head injuries. I'd like y'all to think about that. Maybe some more important people than me will push you for either a ban or some reform. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
David, should he come before the school board with that?
No, the high school board.
The high school board, yeah.
High school board?
Yeah, yeah.
Does anyone else have any issues in public participation? We're going to move on to unfinished business, which is the FY19 budget. And I'm going to throw it over to the town manager because he's prepared us a wonderful memo.
Thank you. Yes, the memorandum dated January 18th provides the substance of your backup for tonight's meeting along with the attachments there. I'm going to refer to a couple of those briefly here. The two items that are listed on the agenda, the use of fund balance and the FY19 property tax rate, are interrelated completely, as you know, at this point in the process where we've been thoroughly through the other revenues. I got a quick footnote to add about the other revenues here in a moment. But the decision for you tonight is to weigh the balancing act of use of fund balance and the implications of more or less use of fund balance alongside the expected property tax rate increase that would come from this budget. And increasing one decreases the other and vice versa. So there's that relationship to consider. We tried to provide some context for you here, and I'll review that in just a second. And there's also the relationship between this year's decision and the next year's budget and the same factors that you'll be considering at that time. To weigh before you make a decision around this evening. Our hope and your intent is that by the time we're done this evening, you'll have made this decision regarding the budget, about these two items, and that you, in the second item of business this evening, will have reviewed and tentatively approved the warnings for town meeting for this year, so that a week from tonight, we can bring you both in final form where we would expect to be together for a shorter period of time without a lot of discussion, because we will be bringing you the final products of what you've asked for. And you'll be able to, if we get it right, you'll be able to just look at those and approve them next week. So speaking to the fund balance and property tax rate question, the first thing I want to note is that we have adjusted the use of fund balance. Since the last time you saw the budget, staff has adjusted down the use of fund balance by $35,000 and added that and increased the amount of expected interest earnings by $35,000 because of the decision that you made a couple of weeks ago to place a large portion of the town's savings, if you will, the fund balances from the various funds, not just the general fund, into a money market account, which will stay liquid and be collateralized, but earn a better interest rate than where it's been in just the overnight earnings. So the expected earnings from that is going to exceed $50,000 across all the town funds. The general fund portion of that we expect to be about $35,000 for fiscal year 19. And so we've added that into the non-tax revenues and reduced the use of fund balance by that same $35,000. If you turn to the fourth page of the backup materials, which is a set of 4 tables, the header on it is FY19 General Fund Budget, Property Tax Impact, and Use of Fund Balance. I'm going to refer to the numbers here. If the visual image of the graph lines is easier for you to work with, that's on the very next page to show the relationship between this year's decision and the future year's decisions. But I want to work from the set of numbers because on that sheet you see both the relationship between the 2 years and the 4 choices set out here in terms of what happens if more or less fund balance is used, what happens to the potential property tax rate. One quick footnote, too, on the rate. Each of the last several years, and we expect it to be true again this year, although there's no guarantee until we get months down the road and we finalize a grand list. Our expectation is that the final impact of this budget on the tax rate that will be assessed for next year's collection of taxes will be slightly less than the numbers we're talking about tonight, because this presumes that there'll be no increase in property value. But each year for well over a decade, there's been small increases in the property value in town. We expect that to be true again this year. That small increase will then slightly decrease the impact of this. So for instance, a year ago, the decision that was made at the comparable meeting to this and then approved at town meeting was for a 3.5 penny increase in the tax rate. The actual tax rate, the impact of the budget once the grand list was finalized, was 3.1 cents. So we can expect that there'll be a slight adjustment down from what you decide tonight. Having said that, the 4 choices we've laid out here, and there are of course others. If your discussion tonight takes us into a more complicated consideration for things that aren't here, we'd be happy to run some quick calculations on that. But what we've shown here, the four different options are shown for a reason. So the first one, actually the second in the top to bottom of the list, but the one that's shaded and the first one I want to speak to is where we are right now. Based on all of the consideration you've given over the last actually 10 or 11 meetings of the board into various specific budget matters, we've arrived at a place where the use of fund balance would be $735,000 and the tax rate increase is estimated at 3.9 cents to fully fund the totality of the decisions that you've made. That, as we have discussed on prior nights, will take the use of the unassigned fund balance down slightly below the 10% guideline that's been adopted by the board and adhered to by the town over the years. If you were to want to keep to the 10% guideline, That's what the box up above indicates, where you'd have to have a 4.2 cent increase in the tax rate in order to use just $700,000 of fund balance. Using $700,000 of fund balance would keep us right at the 10%. Using the 735 would take us to 9.8% instead of the 10% standard. I'm not anticipating that you'll want to move to the 4 cents. We've had a good bit of discussion about trying to stay under 4 cents with this budget. We are there now. So I offer the alternative of going up to 4.2, not to recommend it, but just to show what the impact would be if we did adhere fully to the 10% standard. Going down just to 9.8%, especially with $450,000 use of fund balance for the fire truck this year, I think is not an irresponsible thing to do. So staff recommends that you adopt the combination of property tax rate increase and use of fund balance that is shown in the shaded box that reflects the sum total of our work to date. If you were to want to use more fund balance in order to have a lower property tax rate increase, the next box down is shown at 770 use of fund balance because that's where we were the last time we talked. So the use of fund balance because of that 10% standard, when we recognized the ability to put $35,000 of non-tax revenue in for the interest earnings on our investments, we deducted that from this 770 and took the use of fund balance down to 735 so that we would stay closer to the 10% guideline. But if you chose to stay at the 770, that's already the place where we were in your prior discussions, and that would basically just reverse that. That would then take that $35,000 value of the additional non-tax revenue and reduce the tax rate increase magnitude accordingly, which would take it to 3.6 cents. At the 770, we'd be at 9.6% of the towards the 10% of the guideline. And then the last item that we show here, we show because it's the place where we first started these discussions back on November, in the first week of November, where we were discussing an $800,000 use of fund balance and a 3.4 cent increase in the tax rate. That's just about exactly where we began. The budget itself has changed in material ways since then, but the things that have gone up and the things that have gone down, and both the revenues and the expenditures, bring us back to a place where if you used $800,000 worth of fund balance, it would result in a 3.4 cent increase. So we thought it was appropriate to show that also, because frankly, in November, I brought you those numbers. I brought them to you reluctantly at that time. We've had a good bit of discussion about that since then. And the one thing I would want to reinforce is that since that time, we've been able to identify actually a less expensive way to purchase the fire aerial ladder truck. And so I would urge you not to go this far in use of fund balance because the basis for which we were initially considering it at the early meetings regarding this budget was the need to put $500,000 worth of fund balance into the truck. And since we've been able to reduce that to $450,000, I think it gives us an opportunity to not go as deep down into the use of fund balance. If you did choose this option at the bottom, we'd actually go down to 9.4% compared to that 10% standard. The other thing to consider there is the 2-year impact. So if you approve the budget as it is before you this evening, this year's increase is estimated at 3.9 and next year's increase is estimated at 3.3 cents. If you approve the one that's just below that, that would take us back to using $770,000 worth of fund balance, each of the 2 years is estimated at 3.6. If you take it all the way down to the bottom box, this year's tax increase is only 3.4, but we would expect to have an increase next year at 3.8. So you've really just reversed the impacts from the one year to the other year. So we recognize that you might find a sweet spot in that second box from the bottom, and I would say to you, I think that's a perfectly fine place to land. But for the reasons that I've described, staff recommends that you actually approve the shaded box, the second one from the top. I had a conversation with the chair before the meeting when she asked me about the impact of this for an individual taxpayer. It'll drill it down to what will folks actually pay from households. I apologize for not having included that. That is an important measure for us on these things, and we always include it in the budget message. I should have included it in the memo tonight so that that would have popped out, not just for you, but for members of the public who are reviewing these materials. But I do have that before me now. So at the 3.9 cent increase option, it would be $39 per $100,000 of property value, or $9.75 per quarter per $100,000. So we offer it that way because that's an easy way for people to recalculate it into their own impact based on their own personal property value. But another important way to look at it is for the median home value in town, which is about $175,000. And for the median home value, the annual tax increase would be $68, and the per quarter tax increase would be $17. The comparable figures for the box immediately below, where it would be the 3.6 this year and estimated to be 3.6 again next year, would be $36 per hundred, or $9 per quarter, or $63 for the median home value, $15.75 per quarter. So using the annual numbers, you're looking at 39 versus 36 per $100,000 of value, or 68 versus 63 for the median home value. Be happy to answer questions, or just kind of sit back and wait your discussion.
Does anyone have any questions or any comments?
No, Britt, you look like you're ready to talk.
One question. Is anybody worried that this is way too much of a tax increase?
Are you talking about the 3.9?
Any of them? Really, well, yeah. And I'm just off the top, because if not, then we should probably choose one of these and go home, rather than try and look at ways to whittle away at whatever else is there.
Yeah.
It's always too high.
Yeah.
It's always too high.
I agree with that, and I agree
No,
with that.
I mean, in the beginning, Brandy and I were talking, nobody else was here, so we could. And she pointed out
Okay.
that we have, that we have all these things that we have had in the that we like the staff and the snowplow and the training, and then the recommendation for, or not recommendation, but we put in the budget more for human services, and well, you know what all those things are. So obviously the taxes are going to be up, and these are all things that people came and rattled the doors and said we want. And the consequence of wanting those things and everything else we have is that the taxes are going to go up. Mm-hmm. So, well, just that. So that's kind of where we are, and this is, given all of that, this makes, you can almost throw a dart, but you mentioned something about a sweet spot, and so, I heard that. But it just, I'm not sure if we're okay with going with almost a 4-cent tax increase, then that's fine. That's fine with me. I would like to see it at 2, and I've got a couple ideas, but they're not easy. And there are drawbacks to both of them, so.
I was going to say, I think it's really important to sort of, as an addendum to what you said about, I'd rather it doesn't go up. I mean, the large portion of what we're looking at here is not these individual items that we've added on or the extra services that the community has actually asked us to add on. The main portion is things get more expensive and we have to pay for them, or we have to cut services. That's how I see it. I don't hear a clamoring in our community for cutting of services or of staff or because everyone does a good job and watches the pennies, I think. And so I just want to throw that out there, that I think I don't want the public to perceive that a lot of this is just us spending money. I think a lot of it is explained by inflation. In fact, inflation is at something like 2.25 or something like that. So you could argue that if we were to go for the 3.9 or let's say 3.18%, which is the shade of the staff recommendation, you could argue that 2 or a little bit more of that is simply inflation on the level of service that this town already provides.
Well, that's the thing, there's always that clamoring between both sides. And we hear every year that, my God, how can the taxes go up? And my God, you're gonna cut services? So it's like, you know, and you're constantly fighting those two battles. And I tend to agree with David. I don't want to see it anywhere near a 4, but I just don't know how, without being drastic on something, that it can come down.
Well, we can get it down to 3.6.
Right, right.
With the figure I want.
You know, so I've never been under that tent of saying that we can't go below the 10%. I mean, I've always said it's still the taxpayers' money. It's, you know, and so it's nice to stay there, and maybe we'll. But then again, then we get into that old habit again of using that money, and so I'm contradicting myself as I'm speaking. But that's the problem, is that, you know, we don't want to go below the 10, and we use that to offset some taxes, and then the next year it bites us because now we've got to replace that, and, you know, so what do you do?
I so agree with you on that. And also it feels kind of artificial. Like, don't worry, yeah, we're doing this stuff, but we didn't really raise your taxes. But, you know, we are the collector of taxes, we are the steward of taxes, and we can either make sure that your taxes go really far and are well invested in infrastructure and services that you need, or we can just collect the bare minimum, you know, and cut the things that you want. I mean, that's what it is. Or we're artificially offsetting it with fund balance. That's why I almost came in wanting to just stick with 4, because I was like, let's just be honest. But I am open to other options, obviously. But I was kind of like, let's just show this what it is. It's a year where we're investing more in things that people have asked us to invest in. That costs money.
And that's where I think, again, and I hate to put it onto them, but it is them. It's the representative town meeting that should be
Exactly.
out there
Yep.
beating the bushes, saying, what do you people want? And then come back to that meeting, because that is, our job is to try to get it down to something that's reasonable. And then it's their job to argue the facts of everything that's in it.
Hash it out.
And, you know, that's,
I agree 100%.
No, I want to ask the town manager something, just to clarify.
Sure.
In the first box, the $700,000, that's actually going towards capital projects or something.
Correct.
Right? The $735,000 in the next box, $35,000 is going to tax relief. I mean, is that way we can
Actually,
think
so
about it?
I would suggest you think about it this way. The 735 is also going to capital.
Right.
It's putting a little more into that capital from fund balance than we normally feel is prudent. In any normal year, we'd want to adhere to the 10%. This
Right.
isn't a normal year.
Right.
We have the
Right.
fire truck expense and the requests from the community to increase some services in certain areas. And in the combination of all of that, that 735, I think, still can be, in fact, I don't just think, it is reflected both in the budget and in the warning at this point, in the draft form of the warning, that all goes to capital, and I think it's proper for you to think about it that way, and we just draw down the below the 10 slightly in order to afford that capital investment. As you go to the other two options, I can't really say the same thing about capital. Either of using the 770 or the 800 would be the balance between the 735, and either of those numbers would be to provide a little bit of tax
Well,
relief.
that's what I was sort of getting at.
Yeah.
Like, do we actually have $735,000 worth of capital projects?
We absolutely have
So
that
that's
and
honest.
more.
and more.
But here's the thing is, so, you know, at 770 or at 800, we could allocate it against capital.
Right.
But at that point, what happens is we're not really making progress. Remember, we've established a goal for ourselves of trying to get to $1 million a year of real-time funding for
Yep.
capital.
Yep.
We're not quite there yet, but we're up over $800,000 this year if we do it this way at the 735. If we go with one of the other two, we won't make that progress. We'll be more level from where we were last year at 700 and change. And I can get
Right.
accurate numbers for that if you want.
So basically, what my point is, when you get to 770, and we're only putting $35,000 towards tax relief.
That's correct.
So and I'm saying only in a good way. Like, we're not taking a lot of the fund balance and putting it towards tax relief.
Yes.
For $35,000, we get to lower.
I do
you see
agree.
what I'm saying?
I do agree with that, which is why in the first instance, while I recommend the shaded box, I don't think that it's at all irresponsible if you were to move down to the next box. Beyond that, I would become concerned. My advice to you would be, we're using too much of the fund balance for the reasons that some of you have already articulated.
Yeah, I think with the, there's only $15,000 in this budget for the fire truck. And each year after that, it's going to be 60 unless we get the grant, right? Which of
Correct.
course, I'm sure we're going to get.
Yeah.
And there's also, as Kate's pointed out, the benefits for the new staff person, so there's $65,000, $70,000 on top of this that we're going to have next year, that we know, the year after this coming one, that we're putting into that budget right now.
Right.
By the actions that we're taking now, so it bounces up around $100,000.
Yep, that's right. And just, if I might amplify that for the public, I know that all of you understand this, but for the folks who are following along with us, the budget actually contains a good bit more money than the 15 for the fire truck, but it's use of fund balance and borrowed funds that would allow us to actually acquire it.
Right.
And then paying back the debt for 10 years has only $15,000 in it in this first year because it's interest only.
Yeah, thank you.
And then for the remainder, it would be $60,000 a year.
It was almost shorthand rather than the whole story. Yeah, thanks.
So, what do people want?
Well, how about, I'll just toss that out there.
The compromise?
I move that we adopt box 3 from the top.
Which is the 3.6
The
cent.
0.036 cent rise in the tax rate, which is $36 per 100,000, or $63 per median per 100,000.
Is there any discussion on that?
What was the school budget's?
Oh, that's what I was going to ask.
The town school budget is the same, the tax rate is exactly the same. I think we added
7?
114 or 100, I can't remember, we're over $100,000 in the budget increase, but because our student numbers are better,
Right.
the tax rate will be the same for the town district. When we add in the high school district, it will go up.
It goes
And
up.
they did pass that budget. I haven't seen the numbers, but I think it's 6 cents or thereabouts on those fronts.
For the high school?
Yeah,
I don't have it right here.
yeah, but it's going to be up some.
Franz Reichman from the Finance Committee. David, I just want to throw one thing in here, which is that the proportion of kids between the two districts, the town school district and the high school district, has changed. So while what
this year.
David said is correct as far as what the school board did for the budget, the shift in that ratio
Right.
is actually going to make it look like the town school tax went up. At least that's what I think. Most people are going to see a number at the bottom of the page and say, well, why did it go up? And there are these adjustment factors that come from the state that make the numbers change, even though what David said is true, that the rate that could be set through budgetary means is the same. So just sort of what you're getting at, I think, is a political question of, hey, how's this going to look to the
Right.
town meeting reps? And it may not look quite as rosy. That's my perspective, is that there's going to be a lot of eyebrow raising at
Is that
various
because of the
points.
GO students? Because of the?
Well, that's why that's a large part of.
No,
why
it
the
has
high-
nothing to do with that.
It doesn't.
Well, something else. Well, actually, it's because of the CLA and those two other things that Franz pointed out to us, that our taxes don't go up because of anything we did. It's really all these adjustments that happen. But what we decided to do at the town board is we want the same tax rate as last year. Bring us a budget that does that, and that's what they did. Now, there are more, and I think the high school is now we're a larger percent of the high school population. We used to be around 49, I think now we're 50 or 51% of high school. So we get a bigger chunk of that.
So I'm just trying to figure out what the total impact on
I don't know if,
a resident in Brattleboro right
I'm
now
sure
is
the
gonna be.
numbers are available, I just haven't seen them yet. But I think it's probably gonna be six or thereabouts.
Unfortunately, though, we only have
We don't- I
control
know,
over our
we don't.
side.
No.
Neither
We
does the
don't.
school
You know?
board.
We're
Yeah.
going first this year.
Yes.
Doesn't matter.
Excellent.
I like going first.
I could go either way. I could go with the shaded one or the one that you recommended. I mean, it's,
I'm down with it.
I like to be honest with you, I like box 3 because it's
Right.
leveler.
I
is what's
did see
wrong.
that too, yeah, it is more consistent.
What is that?
Leveler.
Leveler?
Across the-
Past tense?
Well, right now, if all holds, it's .036 this year, then .036
Oh,
next
I see.
year, as opposed
I
to
see.
3.9 and then 3.3.
I see.
Yeah.
And that's
Four,
one-
two,
I mean,
and then
it's you're paying the same
Right.
over the years, but it's how it's
I noticed
balanced.
that too.
And that's the one that brings us down to 9.6 on our. on the
That's
side.
correct. Yes.
But of course, we can't fully anticipate what's happening in the future, so these
Right.
future numbers may change.
They're just a forecast.
Yeah.
But when John was here last week with the budget, we're running about a couple of percent surplus, which is very typical. Actually, it was a little bit higher last year.
I'd vote for that
Started
one.
bouncing my chair.
I'd vote for that one.
Which one are you talking about?
3,
Three.
the one that David made the
The
motion on.
on. Yeah, that's why the motion on the floor.
Tim's looking
T.
like,
Wessel.
well, you know, I'm
T.
not-
Wessel, what do you got?
So, in my sort of lack of sleep state, as I was coming to the meeting, I got this image of a balloon animal. You know, balloon animals, you get bears. So say someone,
That gets worse.
Yep.
It's called baby brain.
if someone makes you a balloon animal and you want to like make the leg a little smaller, what happens to the rest of the animal?
Gets bigger.
Right. So in a way, it's a little bit smoke and mirrors-ish when it comes to these numbers, I think, because it would be a feel-good thing to say, okay, we brought it in at 3.6 cents versus 3.9. But I don't really see a huge advantage to that, and it also sort of works our way against acknowledging what we talked about earlier with the extra services and the purchase of a fire truck coming up and all of these things that we just must pay for. So in my view, the staff recommended shaded area of using 9.8% on the guideline strikes the balance for me. Because it does acknowledge that we have some extra things to pay for. We have some community desire for us to increase services, especially with, say, the sidewalk plow and things like that. And it doesn't sort of push things off to the next select board, whoever that may be, quite as much.
And this is gonna sound snarky, but I can go along with that too. I mean,
No, that doesn't sound
I
smart
can't
at all.
you know, exactly, that's
Yeah.
the dilemma that you're in.
Yeah.
You know,
Well-
pick one and you throw the dice and you go, okay.
I think
well,
it's also,
yeah.
it's important to note that when I look at this range, we're talking 4.2 cents all the way down to 3.4 cents, which is, we talked about median of the higher amount, or no, of the staff recommended amount being $68
Right.
a year.
That's for per 1,000.
So the difference between these decisions, these four, amount to a median household paying $10 less at the very bottom?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
That's skipping a latches movie for one person, you know. That's not, we're not talking about big numbers, this range here.
Well, I know,
There are
again,
people
but,
for whom that's a meal.
but
Sure,
that's,
sure.
yeah, you know, so.
Well,
But-
the other thing is that looking at the, it's the reason for the third one, and I am happy to go along with what you said. It's just which one do we prefer? Is that it does go a little bit more into the reserve fund, and since we've been able to finish each year with a little bit of a surplus, I'm more comfortable with taking a little bit more of that and saving that. You know, it's only $10. It winds up being a whole lot of money when you add it all up for the whole town. But I don't know. I would like to see us just take a little bit more out and keep it a little bit lower.
I mean, if there was a budget in here that got us down to like 2.5, I'd be arguing for that one. I'd be going, yes, let's get this rate down, because What is the one comment that we hear constantly and constantly and constantly in Brattleboro? Our taxes are too high. And every year, we fight this battle of, well, how do you do it? And it's taking that balloon and, but it's,
Well, you can take out loans and pay it over long periods of time. Take a low bond for the sidewalk plow and save a penny.
but the one thing that has really struck with me over the years, after 7 or 8 years here, is that the community on a whole still doesn't want to give up services.
No.
It's mind-boggling. It really is. And every year it seems like it gets worse. Nothing against DPW or anything, but the sidewalks are getting worse. I don't know. Are they getting worse or is
You
it?
drive on Western Avenue today?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I hit the big one.
Yeah.
I tried
So
Oh, yeah.
that's the dilemma you're in. And welcome to budget season.
Pothole season when we do the budget. That's tough.
I haven't seen Western Avenue that
Chomping
bad
at
in
the
a long
bit to say
time.
something.
I saw 4 cars pulled over the other day with tires blown. I mean,
There was only one coming in.
You guys, our town manager wants to clarify something.
Yes, sir.
So 3 separate times the sidewalk plow has come up, and the first time I let it go because it was in a long list of things and I didn't think it was really important to jump into that. But since it's come up 3 times now, I want to just remind you that the decision that you've all made about that was to put it on. You'll see that in the warning when we consider the warning here shortly. Put it on the warning so that town meeting gets a chance
Yes.
to decide that one way or the other, but you did not put that into this budget.
did not.
You did
I
not.
thought we did.
So what is reflected in here is still all those other ways in which, between discussions at the board level and things you've been asked to do by the community and the recommendation from the Human Services Review Committee, all those different things where we are in fact trying to expand the reach and the positive impact of town government. That is still the reason why this is a bit larger than a usual incremental increase. But the sidewalk plow is not a part of that.
Do you remember how
So
much that
that's
was going to add?
$140.
Yeah, it's $140,000, so it would be another
Yeah.
penny and a quarter
So
if-
that would be another.
if town meeting approves it. But it'll be a separate question before them on the warning.
Yeah. Oh, here it is.
I knew it was question.
and I'm actually glad it's a separate question.
I am too.
I really am.
It
I mean, I was really surprised the way it was written up in number 14 or whatever.
23.
That it was written like that. I was happy about that.
Yep.
And I didn't necessarily, I should have not used that example because it wasn't a great one. But it is an example of our community saying, we want this expansion of services. So that's still a good comparison.
Great. Thank you, Peter. I thought that was in there. I thought we put all those things in.
Yeah.
Does that push anybody closer to the third one?
I'm already at the third one. I mean, I think putting 35,000 of the fund balance in is a small way to get this down. And this is, I look at this 2 ways, and I think David said it, sometimes a little increase doesn't seem like a lot, but for some people it is.
It is.
And second of all, when we're trying to attract people to move and come here, and I know it seems like a little difference, but when you say, hey, we're getting a 4-cent tax increase versus a 3.6 or 7 increase, it's psychological
It is.
for people moving here. So that's one of the things, I worry about. And if we were saying we're going to put 300,000 from the fund balance in, that would be one thing. But we're talking 35,000 just to get something a little bit lower. I think it's reasonable. I mean, I would love to go more. I mean, we have this debate all the time, whose money is the fund balance? It's the taxpayers who are putting this in. So, if we can use a little bit of it to give people some relief, even though it's small as though it may be, but then, if people do want the snow plow, that's going to add, and we're going to be over 4 cents, or, on the second one.
All right.
If you add
Right.
that in.
I mean, Tim, you're eating popcorn for supper. I mean, that's a meal, buddy.
It's my meal.
No, I know. That's a whole other penny.
Now, let me ask you, the added money from the bond, I mean, the Brattleboro Savings and Loan Money Market?
Yes.
Has that been factored into the years ahead?
Yes.
We're going to get 50,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in the forecast years, we've adjusted only for those things where we could easily extrapolate from decisions you're making in this year's budget
Right.
to how they'll impact the future.
Okay.
We haven't done a full update like we would do in the long-term financial plan, but the things that were known, so for instance, the human services budget with the $26,000 increase from last year to this year, we forecasted it for the future years at the higher rate.
Okay, because I mean other revenue, was the Brattleboro Savings and Loan extra money going into other revenue?
Yes, in each one of those years.
Okay, so we're not predicting very much then, because it's not going up very much. Other revenue only doesn't go up very much each year.
Right,
So
because
it's
it's already in. So what we're saying is we kept it in for each one of those others. We put it in for now, and then it stays in at that same $35,000 value each year for the future years.
Okay,
That's a
So
recovery.
once it's
So it's
the
in-
impact of it is visible this year,
Okay.
and then it's just steady as she goes for the
I
remainder
see,
of the
okay.
forecast.
I
That's
gotcha,
good, because
I
it's
gotcha.
tied to Wall Street Journal Prime, right? And that could
Right.
fluctuate in either direction, although I would imagine it could possibly tick up quarter basis point or so over the next couple.
We're optimistic that in fact it will go up. We're in an environment now where it looks as though for the foreseeable future, interest rates are probably going to creep up. But that's not a bet we want to place on our
Ever.
our forecast of
If they
non-tax
do,
revenue.
they have to pay more when we borrow as well. So.
Want to vote on David's motion?
Yeah.
is everybody done asking questions? Does anyone in the public have any comments or questions about what we're talking about?
Star?
No, but I didn't.
I was like, yes.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt, I don't know if we want to call it option 3, which would be a rise in the tax increase of 0.036, which would equal a 2.93% increase in property tax rates. Is that where everybody, that was the motion that I heard?
Seems like it.
Okay, all those in favor of adopting what we're calling option 3, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
We have, the motion carries 4-1.
Awesome. Oh, wait, I put the warnings away.
Get the warnings. Okay, next up, we're going to go over the draft warnings for town meeting. And do you want us just to go through each one of these?
Yeah,
Would you like us to
if
do
I could
that?
just note as overview that these are the product of some extensive work that Jan and Bob Fisher have done together, and then some additional review by others of us on town staff and by Lauren Crisp as well. So we believe they are both accurately reflecting the decisions that you've made along the way regarding various items that are in here, and that they are properly formed in terms of compliance with the statutes and the town charter.
Okay.
So yes, if we could kind of go page by page and just have you call out anything that you have any concern or question about, we'll address that so that the one we bring you a week from tonight is ready for you to just say yes to.
Okay. Just, what I might do is just because people watching on TV are not going to know what we're talking about, I'm not going to read all the articles, but, we can summarize some of them we can actually read. And the first, Article 1 is regarding the town school district and BUHS district. And it was the town meeting members.
Extra?
Extra?
The first 2 articles are what will be on the ballot
Okay, those are
for the
ballot.
actual town
Okay.
meeting day
Okay.
election.
Okay.
And then it starts over at
Okay.
Article 1 again
Oh,
on
I see.
page 2
Okay.
for the annual
Oh, yeah.
representative town meeting.
Yeah. Now, can I ask a question about the Article 2 that we probably don't have to talk about, which
Sure.
is tell the town adopt the following advisory resolution?
Yes.
Which is about energy and everything.
Yes.
Who put this one in, just so we know?
Sure. So there's a statewide organization that is trying to get this onto the ballot
Yep.
in many different towns. I don't know how many,
Yep.
but dozens of towns across Vermont.
Yep.
And the local arm of that organization went out and collected signatures and exceeded the threshold that was required in order for it to be placed on the
Right.
ballot. Those signatures have all been certified by the town clerk's office, and so it is
Good.
necessary and proper that it be on
Down
the
there.
ballot.
So yep, and so as you said, those are going to be voted by Australian ballot
Yes.
on town meeting day.
And that election will be here at the Municipal Center in the Select Board meeting room.
Okay. Then we get to actual town meeting, which is March 24th, 2018. Article 1 is to act on the auditor's reports for the town and town school district. If anybody has any like red flags, go like this. I'm just going to quickly go see them. Article 2 is to see if the town and town school district will authorize the select board for, it's basically hiring
Pay
a
their
public
bills.
accountant for the school. Article 3 is to ratify the select board's appointment of a town and town school district clerk. Article 4, to ratify the select board's appointment of a town and town district treasurer. Article 5, to ratify and approve the select board's appointment of a town attorney. Article 6, to elect 2 representatives to the Capital Grant Review Board, and those are nominated on the floor, so we have nothing, we're not the ones that pick people. Article 7 is to elect or appoint members to the Town Finance Committee, and those are nominated from the floor as well. Article 8 is to elect trustees to the Brooks Memorial Library.
That one's gonna get a lot of action.
Yeah, get ready.
Sorry, Stan.
Article 9 is to see if the town will authorize its select board to borrow money in anticipation of taxes, grants, and other revenue. Article 10 is to see what salaries the town will pay its officers.
$50,000.
Yes.
That'll come up.
And then, of course, Article 11 is one of the bigger ones, is to see if the town will authorize capital purchases for the fire department. And obviously, the biggest one is the $950,000 aerial ladder truck.
Hold on, Kate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Yes.
So I'm a little bit confused. Article 11 is the ladder truck.
Yep.
The ladder truck is in the budget.
Yes.
That's
Man.
The
Go ahead.
question I have is, if it's in the budget, town meeting members cannot vote to specifically move anything from a line item, but you're giving them that option.
Actually, they must do that here because of the fact that it's borrowing for more than 5 years. So the 10-year note that we anticipate taking out to buy the truck requires an Australian ballot at town meeting. So there'll be a discussion about Article 11 and then a paper ballot
Okay,
to decide it.
thank you.
just, now, the chief has probably asked the question.
So, yeah, if
Everybody's, do you want to explain that?
Yeah, I'd like to actually, if you don't mind, I'll explain the relationship between
Okay.
11, 12, 13, and
Okay.
14, because
Okay.
they're all kind of a cluster.
Yeah.
So 11 is what we just discussed. It's when the real discussion of the body is going to happen about the truck, and then the decision gets made by the body by Australian ballot. 12 assumes that the Australian ballot vote is going to be a yes, and is the way in which the body authorizes, because again, only representative town meeting can authorize use of fund balance. That's not something that staff can do or the select board can do. So 12, 13, and 14 all address the use of fund balance. 12 is a companion item to 11, where the $450,000 use of fund balance for the purchase of the truck, it gets authorized. 13 is the select board's recommendation for a $20,000 use of fund balance to be contributed from the town into the skate park fund. And 14 is the remaining use of fund balance, although 14 is likely to change. The number for the use of fund balance changes by the $35,000 that you just approved. So it'll take this 265 to $300,000. And so with the select board's blessing, I'm going to look at our capital request and adjust it. It won't be these same two items that are listed tonight, the excavator and the Gibson-Aiken Center roof project, but it'll be whatever combination of a couple of different things are reflect the $300,000 use of fund balance to show that that's being spent towards a capital item. Okay.
And just to clarify a couple of things, Article 11, the decision, we won't know the decision until after town meeting, because it's usually when polls close.
That's correct.
And Article 11 could be voted down and Article 12 could pass, which means we wouldn't buy the truck. And Article 11 could go down, you know what I mean? It could be vice versa.
So if they both get passed, we're ready to go get the truck.
Yeah.
If 11 fails, we're not allowed to borrow, and we would be, but if 11 fails and 12 passes, we wouldn't have the authority to go borrow the money that we plan to borrow, but if we get the grant, we would have authority to use the $450,000 of fund balance, and we'd still go ahead and buy the truck. If 12 is turned down on the floor discussion and vote, we wouldn't be able to use fund balance. I suppose we still could, if 11 passes, we still could borrow that portion, and if we got the grant, we could use the borrowed funds as our match for the grant, and then the grant instead of the use of fund balance. Obviously, if they both go down, then we aren't able to buy the truck this year.
That's right. Okay.
So in 3 of the 4 different scenarios, we'd still be able to move forward, but 2 of those would require us to successfully get the grant.
Right. Right.
When will we know on the grant? That's not going to be until.
It takes a while, which is something we'll need to feel our way through. We'll see how this comes out of town meeting, and then the timing of the actual placing of the order will depend on town meeting's action and the status of the grant. We'll work through that together as it moves along.
Okay, so as you said, Article 12 is using $450,000 to pay out of the unassigned fund balance to pay for the aerial ladder truck. Article 13 is to use unassigned fund balance to put $20,000 for the skate park. Article 14 has now changed. It's going to read to see if the town would transfer from the unassigned general fund balance to the capital fund the sum of $300,000. And as Peter just said, the purpose of what that $300,000 is going for is going to be different than what we have in it now, because he's going to work it out. So it's whatever adds up to $300,000 is going to be the purpose. Does that make sense to everybody? Article 15 is to approve the select board's expenditure from the capital fund to make emergency repairs performed at Harris Place Embankment. Article 16 is the $78,000 through special assessments for the Downtown Improvement District. Article 17 is to raise and appropriate money through a special assessment on properties within the Mountain Home Trailer Park, Mountain Home Park, to help them with capital improvements. Does that make sense to everybody? Article 18 is the human services budget, or human services line items, which add up to $146,000. Article 19 is to appropriate $300 as a contribution to Green Up, Vermont.
How do you feel about that, Kate?
Article 20 is to raise and appropriate $1,000 for a contribution to the Southern Vermont Watershed Alliance. Article 21 is to raise and appropriate $10,000 to assist in funding Brattleboro Sustainable Energy Coalition, which is the follow-up organization to what we've usually done as Brattleboro Climate Protection.
Right.
Article 22, to see how much money the town will raise, appropriate and expend to defray all of its expenses and liabilities, in addition to any funds authorized for any other articles in these warnings.
That's the vote on the budget.
That's the big vote.
Yep.
22, huh?
Article 22 is the big vote. Article 23 is to authorize purchase of this is the sidewalk plow. So this is the purchase of a sidewalk plow in the amount not to exceed $140,000. As the town manager just says, this is not included in the budget. So if it is passed by town meeting, it's going to be an additional expense added to the budget. Article 24 is to authorize the expenditure of $24,000 from program income for SEVED's Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategies. Again, the program income is not from property taxes. Article 25 is to exempt from the education portion of real estate taxes the Bradley House for a period of 1 year. Then we go on to Article 26, which is the salaries of town school district will pay its school board members. Article 27, see if the town school district will authorize its school board directors to borrow money in anticipation of taxes. Article 28, to see if the town school district will authorize the district to accept and expend grants and aid received from the state of Vermont and the U.S. government. Then Article 29, this is the big one, shall the voters of the school district approve the school board to expend 14 million plus of their budget. And then Article 30, to transact any other business that may lawfully come before the meeting.
That's a fun one.
Yeah, that is a fun one. So does anybody have any questions or concerns about any of these? And again, there's going to be, the Australian ballot will include the first two, wherever that went. The Australian ballot will be the school district members and the climate protection, or whatever that was, 350 Vermont's climate protection resolution. And it will also include the bond, taking out a bond for the aerial ladder truck. Is there another thing on there?
It'll be a separate Australian ballot,
Right,
though.
right.
So the one for the ladder truck will be during the course of the representative town meeting.
Yep. That's right, these are on the two that I mentioned were on the actual town meeting day, March 6th.
Correct.
Does anyone have any issues with any of this? Or are we comfortable with these? We're not gonna, next week is when we're doing the final sign off, and then we'll decide eventually decide who's gonna say what. Is that good?
Sounds
Anyone in the public have any questions or comments about the town meeting warning and articles? Okay.
good job reading them all, Kate.
Okay, seeing that our business is done, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? We have adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Jan, want us to leave these papers here? This good?
Yeah, I can take it back.